Or Erin Gobra.
May I ask how old you are?
I'm 77. 77. My brother wrote that, composed it. My brother's a composer, you know, wrote the national anthem, our national anthem.
Miss Brenda was very proud of that, wasn't she?
Oh, yes.
Did you hate the English yourself at that time?
Well, I think I did. Sure, they gave us a terrible persecution for years and years and years, didn't they? They did. Well, I was taught to hate them, so I suppose I taught him to hate them the same. My father, when the girls would have a lesson book, there was a lesson in it, God Save the Queen, and the first thing he done was to tear out the page and burn it. So I suppose that it was born in us all, wasn't it?
This is the Royal Canal. Brendan Behan grew up not far from here in Russell Street, then a street of decaying Georgian mansions which had been turned into tenements. And like many another Irish patriot, he spent some time in Mountjoy over here, where he heard the old triangle that went jingle-jangle along the banks of the canal, waking the prisoners bright and early in the morning.
Hey, you there! The screw is listening as well as peeping, and you'll be bloody well weeping if you don't give over your movement. If I go down there, I'll give you something to sing about. B-wing, wings 2, 3, and 1. Stand to your doors.
It's not a bad morning for the races.
No, I don't think I can make it today. Too much to do in the office. Oh, yeah, I heard a lot of commotion last night around in G-Wing. There must have been one of them reprieved.
Which one? There's 2 for a haircut and shave tomorrow. Usually they don't like reprieving one and topping the other.
So as to be on the safe side and not to be making fish of one and flesh of the other, they usually hang both of them. Actually, it must be a great thing to be told at the last minute that you're not going to be topped after all. To be lying there sweating and watching. The 2 screws for that death watch coming on at 12 o'clock and the 2 going off shaking hands with you. And you go to bed and stare up at the ceiling.
And you lie down, get up and lie down. And the 2 screws not letting on to be minding you and not taking their eyes off you for 1/2 minute.
I get on till morning, you hear a bell out in the city and you ask them the time, but they won't tell you.
And then the door is unlocked and everyone sweats blood. And to come in and ask your man to stand up a minute, that's if he's able, while you read him something. I am instructed to inform you that the minister he has recommended to the president.
And the choir fella says, did you say has recommended or has not recommended? I didn't quite catch that.
The Irish are not my audience. They are my raw material.
Would you like the Irish to be your audience as well as your raw material?
No, I don't care. I don't care.
You don't care what opinion the Irish have of you as an Irishman?
Well, I think the Irish that I know and the Irish that I like, who are ordinary blokes, taxi drivers, house painters, buckies runners. I don't say honest workers, Al. Some of them are extremely dishonest workers. Some of them are honest workers, but they're the people I care about. And in any country, they don't buy books very much. Or they don't live by books or by literature, except the newspaper with the racing results.
I think somehow that perhaps you're a bit of a snob.
Me? I am, I suppose. But I'm a snob in various directions. I mean to say, the only people that I don't like here are the theatre-going public and the sort of what passes for society here I don't like. They don't like me, so there's no love lost.
When I knew him, he was young and he sang with a beautiful voice, a lovely voice, and was terribly funny, full of wit, full of humor. Nothing ever just escaped his attention. I had a poem of his in the magazine called 3 Lonelinesses. And I remember one was the loneliness of hearing a train whistle at night when you'd be in prison yourself. That was one example. Another example was the taste of a blackberry. that you'd taken off the branch of a tree in October, say. And I can't think of what the third one was.
The offices of Envoy were across the road in Grafton Street, but its real headquarters was here in the pub. Through its agency, MacDade's, which had hitherto been a sort of bohemian hangout, became a literary, or I suppose you might say, anti-literary pub. If down in the Pearl and the Palace they talked about George Moore's use of the semicolon and Yeats's hopes for the Abbey Theatre, here, to my recollection, we talked about money or the lack of it, drink or the lack of it, sex or the lack of it. Contribute to the same magazine though they might, however, not all of those who came here were always on speaking terms. The peace was kept, and balm for hurt wounds, as well as judicious credit, was supplied by a sympathetic barman, Paddy O'Brien. It says much for Paddy's talents that he could be an ordinary bloke with ordinary blokes, while understanding the complicated woes of literary men at the same time.
Miles now, he drinks mostly all gold labels. Drink an odd pint, but mostly gold label. And you bring home a bottle, as I told you, every day. And Paddy Kavanagh drink pints, whiskey, gin, vodka, you name it. Drank everything. It wasn't going, but anybody give him. And Brendan used to drink pints. As a younger man, then when he wasn't able to drink the pints, he took a couple of brandies.
We had bohemian parties after the pubs. When they shut down, Paddy O'Brien would hand us out the bottles of stout, and we'd all take off for the bona fides, which were out in the hills. If you were outside the 3-mile limit, you could drink. It was according to the law. So we all gave addresses, given, say, over in Holt, which was 3 miles safely out the other side of Dublin. And the parties never stopped, and we never had any money, but somehow or other, there'd be enough money for drink generation, but the basics of food, a 6-penny packet of tea, and enough to buy vegetables to feed the children properly. But you didn't have clothes, and you didn't have proper shoes or anything like that. It was basic. So there was a very happy atmosphere, but we were living on a knife's edge, and it took a very heavy toll on all of us.
For people who lived their lives largely in the pub, there was, of course, a problem about closing time. What did you do when the steel shutters came down? To some extent, that problem was solved for me because I lived in the since-famous Catacombs, the basement of an elegant Georgian mansion in Fitzwilliam Place. The Catacombs has featured in many novels and reminiscences since. In a recent book I read, there was even a mention of orgies. Alas, no.
Yeah, will I go in?
Yeah, you
all right. Yeah.
I won't actually follow you.
Yeah.
The Irish for a festive gathering is Curram Ceol, the phrase implying a necessary connection between booze and song. That was mostly what we had in the Catacombs, nightly, until the very last singer joined his or her audience in sleep. I went back there recently with John Ryan for the first time since those far-off days.
Yeah, constant stream of people coming in here carrying stout bags.
Oh, indeed, yes.
Yeah, and
there were no tin cans then, it was all the bottles, wasn't there?
No,
Yeah.
and of course our landlord, our host, Dickie Wyman, he lived on the returned empties.
That's, yes.
With tuppence on a bottle.
That's right, quite a lot of money then, wasn't
on a
it?
good
Yeah.
night, you know, with 20 or 30 people here, he might make a few quid out of that. He would bring them all back to MacDade's then.
That's right, yeah.
So this was where the living, or partly living.
This was where the action was, yes.
I suppose it was originally the kitchen of the big.
I remember the big fireplace or cooking apparatus. It was an Aga cooker, and
yeah.
about which Brandon made one of his jokes about don't sit on the Aga, Granny. You're getting too old to be riding the rain.
This would have been my little cubby hole. My God, it's all painted up, and these would have been the wine bins.
Just those, yes.
Yeah. And computers, and yeah. It seems even smaller somehow than it did. I mean, there's hardly room here, is there, for my palliasse on the floor?
How did you get into it then?
Yeah, well, that's the question.
And how did Brendan Behan get in as well?
Yeah, Brendan was here once or twice. Yeah,
you mentioned that.
Times, yeah. He bumped here.
Yeah.
It was very difficult to go to a job when you got up here in the total darkness. I went out there and found recumbent forms that had no intention of going to any job. I mean, nobody was setting you a good example. Nobody else was setting you a good example.
No fear of that.
No.
So
there we are. Let's have a look at the rest of the place.
Sure, yeah.
This was the master bedroom, wasn't it?
Yes, that's what I remember Dickie, yes.
Private apartment.
That's right.
Yeah.
And he'd entertain his more exquisite friends in here.
He did, yes. Not very exquisite as I remember them, but he liked the rough trade.
He did, yes.
Yeah.
Well, the shape of it's bringing back lots of memories to me, indeed.
Yeah. I suppose we had a certain amount of fun.
It was harmless fun.
I remember a lot of singing.
Yes.
Everybody had a party piece.
Yeah.
They did it.
And what was your song? I remember I had to sing The Bold Fenian Man.
I sang a very highly dramatised version of The Croppy Boy.
Oh, that's
going
right,
out
yes,
of the room
yeah.
and coming back in again.
That's right. And
Brendan, of course, was the best singer.
Oh, he was the...
He had a beautiful voice.
He sang for me in the early days of courtship. He sang out in a little bar out in this place called the Strawberry Beds in the banks of Liffey. And he sang the Coolin, which is an Irish song out there. And he sang it on my wedding day as well. He sang it in Kildare Street. And all the offices, the windows shot up, and all the little girls, you know, were looking at this man singing the Coolin. What is he singing the Coolin for, you know? See, in those days, Brendan was just an ordinary, rather difficult person who made his living by writing. And when we were married first, we lived off articles in the Irish press, all of £7, I may say, which was not a vast sum. So I used to do a bit of drawing, and I had a series going in the Irish Times called Know Your Grasses, because before I was married, I was a botanical assistant in the museum. So between the two of us, but you see, there was no problem then because he wasn't a celebrity. So we were just two ordinary people, and those were, in some ways, the best time when we'd come in here or into the other pubs, or, you know. No, in those days, I hasten to add, I never went to pubs much, you know. I left that to Brendan.
Somebody, I was asked one time, had success spoil me? I said, no, I was always like this. But most of what I like, I enjoy it, actually.
For somebody who doesn't like being interviewed, you have given an awful number of interviews, or at least you've been quoted.
I think people generally like being interviewed, and I think they like sort of attention, and they they mightn't feel so hot at the time for various reasons, into which we shall not go, Derek, at the moment.
Does the extra security mean nothing to you?
It's changed the way of life in that. I suppose I go to better beds, but I sleep less well.
Since 1939, Miles Nagopoline's column in the Irish Times, Crushkeen Law, had been an essential part of life for intellectual Dubliners. Its humour became their humour. Its mode of response to many sorts of situation became their mode of response. Its dialogue fed back into the world about it, so that it